Something happened in the Arctic that should not be possible, and the data proves it. 6 hours ago, at exactly 8 UTC on February 25, 2026, instruments aboard the European Space Agency's Cryosat-2 satellite detected a thermal event so extreme that it immediately triggered cross-agency verification protocols. This was not slow ice loss, not climate drift, not seasonal melting. A 200-mile section of thick, multi-year polar ice that had existed for roughly 10,000 years vanished completely in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. One moment it was there, dense and stable. The next it was gone. By 8:05 UTC, alarms were cascading through monitoring systems at NASA as data from the Terra satellite confirmed the impossible. The sensors were not detecting meltwater, they were not detecting vapor. They were registering absence, a clean, sharply defined void where the ice used to be, with edges so precise they appeared machined rather than melted. To phase shift that volume of solid ice directly into vapor in under 300 seconds would require an energy input comparable to the entire weekly output of the United States, focused into a single, controlled point. And yet nothing else happened. There was no explosion, no shock wave, no seismic response. Monitoring stations in Greenland and northern Canada reported total silence. A meteor strike of that magnitude would have triggered a magnitude 7 earthquake. A nuclear detonation would have flooded sensors with radiation. Neither occurred. Geiger counters stayed quiet. Seismographs remained flat. The only evidence was a localized thermal spike that appeared, held steady for 4 minutes, and then vanished as if it had never existed. That detail is critical. Heat without chaos implies control. To destroy ice without collateral damage requires technology capable of manipulating molecular bonds directly. When analysts overlaid orbital data from the United States Space Command, one fact stood out. At 8:02 UTC, only one object was positioned directly above the affected region, an object tracked for months. An object that does not behave like a comet, does not behave like an asteroid, and does not conform to known orbital physics. 3I Atlas. Infrared data made the situation even more unsettling. The thermal signature was not diffuse or irregular, as natural phenomena tend to be. It was narrow and coherent, forming a column of energy projected from orbit straight down to the ice. Seconds before the event began, NASA Deep Space Network detected a carrier signal aligned with the object's trajectory. Positioning was independently confirmed by the European Space Agency's Gaia Observatory and Japan's ALOS-2 satellite. 3 agencies, 3 data streams. 1 conclusion. Something in orbit interacted directly with Earth's surface. But the most important question isn't how the ice disappeared, it's where it went. Atmospheric sensors recorded no surge in humidity, no steam plume, no cloud formation. 200 miles of ice vanished, yet none of its mass entered the atmosphere. Matter does not simply disappear. If it became liquid, there should be water. If it became vapor, there should be clouds. Neither existed. Skepticism demanded instrument checks, sensor failure, solar interference, data corruption. That explanation collapsed almost immediately. At 8:01 UTC, just seconds before the anomaly, the European Space Agency's Sentinel-6 satellite passed over the North Pole. Sentinel-6 uses ultra-precise radar altimetry to measure sea level and ice elevation. Its radar pulses suddenly traveled farther than expected. The surface reflection was gone. The ice was already disappearing. At the same time, thousands of miles away, atmospheric monitors aboard China's Tiangong space station detected no increase in water vapor. Melting on that scale should resemble a volcanic eruption in infrared. The sky remained unchanged. Then came the data that removed all doubt. At 8:04 UTC, 2 minutes into the event, NASA's GRACE-4 satellites registered a massive gravitational anomaly. Not at the surface, not in the atmosphere, above it. A concentrated mass was moving upward against Earth's gravity. The ice had not melted, it had been lifted. An invisible column of phase-shifted water was being extracted into orbit, and at the top of that column, at its closest approach to Earth, 3I Atlas was holding position, matching Earth's rotation for a precise 4-minute window. Comets do not hover, they do not brake, they do not park over targets. This one did. At the exact moment that column of mass stopped rising, the orbital data snapped into focus. 3I Atlas was no longer behaving like a passive object falling through space. It was holding position. Matching Earth's rotation requires a continuous adjustment of velocity, a deliberate expenditure of energy. Natural bodies cannot do this. Comets follow Keplerian orbits. They swing, they arc, they leave. They do not hover above a single point on the planet with minute-level precision. Yet for 4 minutes and 12 seconds, that is exactly what 3I Atlas did. When physicists reconstructed the event frame by frame, the implication became unavoidable. The ice was not destroyed, it was harvested. Billions of tons of water molecules were lifted intact, held together by a localized gravitational field that did not spill outward. The surrounding ice remained untouched. The ocean beneath did not surge. The tides did not respond. This was gravity applied with surgical focus, a funnel rather than a wave. That level of control should not exist. For an object only a few kilometers wide to lift that much mass, it would need a gravitational pull comparable to a small moon. If it possessed that mass naturally, Earth would have felt it, satellites would have shifted, oceans would have bulged. None of that occurred. The pull was artificial, confined to a narrow column directly beneath the object. According to general relativity, that implies gravitational lensing created without bulk mass, something only possible through exotic matter or higher-order spacetime manipulation. Technology we do not have, and do not fully understand. As the extraction ended, another anomaly appeared. Spectroscopic instruments were redirected toward 3I Atlas within minutes. The Keck Observatory in Hawaii adjusted its targeting protocol, followed shortly by the Very Large Telescope in Chile. What they saw changed the classification of the object permanently. Before 8 UTC, the spectrum matched inert rock, silicates, carbon compounds, dust. After 8:05 UTC, the spectrum lit up with unmistakable signatures of hydrogen and oxygen. Pure, refined water ice coated the object. It had taken the water. That alone raised questions with no comfortable answers. Why would an interstellar object need water, shielding, life support, propellant? The simplest explanation, a cometary outburst, failed immediately. Outbursts eject material outward. They do not pull matter up from a planet against gravity. Gravity simply does not work that way for small bodies, unless gravity is being generated. Then came the detail buried deep in the raw tracking logs. After absorbing the water, 3I Atlas did not slow down. It accelerated. Orbital models showed a 0.4% increase in velocity compared to the previous day. Heavier, yet faster. That violates Newton's laws unless the added mass was converted into thrust, which means the water was not cargo, it was fuel. That realization reframed the entire event. This was not observation, it was refueling, and the timing mattered. Immediately after the acceleration, trajectory projections shifted. The object was no longer on a simple outbound path back into interstellar space. It was adjusting for another pass. This is where the numbers become terrifying. To remove a 200-mile section of thick ice in 4 minutes requires on the order of 10 to the power of 18 joules of energy. Detonating the entire global nuclear arsenal on that ice sheet would barely achieve comparable thermal input, and it would do so violently. Craters, shock waves, worldwide seismic effects, none occurred. The process was silent, clean, and precise. That suggests matter manipulation at the atomic level, bypassing brute force heating entirely. The spectroscopic data revealed something else. High-energy photons, including tightly focused gamma emissions, appeared during the event, not scattered radiation, a coherent beam. In theoretical physics, this resembles a concept known as a phase transition laser, a hypothetical device capable of forcing matter directly from solid to gas without passing through a liquid state. Instant sublimation, scaled up to a continental level. The power source required for that should be stellar, a star or a black hole. Yet 3I Atlas was right there, small, compact, controlled, and the water did not disperse, it was lifted. The gravitational anomaly confirms that, a narrow, upward-directed pull that affected nothing except the targeted mass. That is not natural gravity, that is engineered gravity. And just when the physics seemed as impossible as it could get, the biological and nuclear data arrived quietly 6 hours later and pushed the event from anomaly into existential threat. 6 hours after the Arctic extraction ended, analysts began noticing irregularities that initially seemed unrelated. These were not dramatic signals, not alarms or spikes, but subtle deviations buried inside routine monitoring reports. At 3 independent nuclear facilities in Europe and North America, neutron flux readings briefly dipped below baseline and then returned to normal within seconds. The drops were small enough that automated systems flagged them as noise. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. Nuclear reactors are closed systems. Their internal reactions are governed by physical constants that do not fluctuate without cause. A synchronized deviation across multiple facilities, separated by thousands of miles, implies an external influence. Engineers rechecked calibration, power load, coolant flow. Everything was nominal. The only anomaly was timing. Every dip occurred within a 12-second window that matched the moment 3I Atlas completed its post-extraction acceleration burn. That coincidence forced a deeper review of data streams normally kept separate. When analysts overlaid reactor telemetry with space-based particle detectors, the connection became impossible to ignore. As the object accelerated, Earth was briefly bathed in a pulse of high-energy particles. Not enough to cause damage, not enough to trigger radiation alarms, but enough to interact with atomic nuclei. The pulse had a distinct signature. It was directional, coherent, and sharply bounded. This was not solar radiation. Solar storms arrive as chaotic floods, affecting wide swaths of the planet unevenly. This pulse arrived like a sheet, passing through Earth in a straight line, aligned with the object's trajectory. For less than 15 seconds, the planet sat inside a beam. That beam did something unexpected. It did not heat matter. It did not ionize the upper atmosphere. Instead, it altered decay rates. Sensitive instruments showed a temporary suppression of beta decay in specific isotopes. That is not supposed to happen. Radioactive decay is considered random, immune to outside interference. Yet the data said otherwise. Something had interacted directly with the weak nuclear force. If true, this crosses a boundary humanity has never crossed. Manipulating gravity is theoretical. Manipulating nuclear forces remotely at planetary scale is beyond speculative. It implies control over the fundamental interactions that define matter itself. As scientists argued over interpretation, another dataset arrived from a completely different field. Biomedical researchers reviewing long-duration astronaut health metrics noticed anomalies in heart rate variability aboard the International Space Station. At the exact moment of the particle pulse, every crew member experienced a brief synchronization in cardiac rhythm, not elevated heart rate, not stress, synchronization. Their heartbeats aligned for approximately 6 seconds before returning to normal. Human hearts do not do this spontaneously, especially across multiple individuals. The phenomenon is well documented in controlled environments using electromagnetic pacing, but never unintentionally, never through shielding, never from orbit. The station's radiation monitors showed nothing unusual, no spikes, no electromagnetic interference, yet the biological effect was measurable. This forced researchers to ask an uncomfortable question. If the pulse could influence nuclear decay and human physiology simultaneously, what else could it interact with? The answer may lie in frequency. Every physical system has resonant modes, natural frequencies at which it responds most strongly to external input. Atomic nuclei, biological tissues, even planetary magnetic fields all resonate at different scales. The pulse emitted during 3I Atlas's acceleration was not broad spectrum, it was tuned. That tuning explains the precision of everything observed so far, the clean extraction of ice, the absence of collateral damage, the selective interaction with specific isotopes, the brief biological synchronization. This was not a weapon. Weapons are inefficient. They waste energy. This was a tool, and tools are designed for specific purposes. As models evolved, a disturbing possibility emerged. The water harvested from the Arctic may not have been collected simply for propulsion or storage. Water is an exceptional medium for energy transfer, electromagnetic propagation, and quantum coherence. In certain theoretical frameworks, it can act as both fuel and amplifier. If integrated into a larger system, it could enhance signal strength dramatically. That magnetic oscillation was small enough to escape public notice, but large enough that every major observatory recorded it. From Alaska to Antarctica, instruments designed to watch for geomagnetic storms registered the same slow, deliberate wave. It was not random. It had a clean rise, a steady peak, and a controlled decay, like a signal being switched on and then carefully turned off. Natural processes do not behave with that level of restraint. The frequency of the oscillation was the next shock. When researchers converted the data into spectral form, the dominant wavelength matched a known resonance of Earth's magnetosphere, a mode that had previously only been observed during controlled laboratory experiments and theoretical simulations. Hitting that resonance allowed the energy input to spread efficiently through the entire magnetic field with minimal power. It was the planetary equivalent of pushing a swing at exactly the right moment. That meant the pulse from 3I Atlas was not aimed at the Arctic alone. The ice extraction was just one interaction point. The real target was Earth itself. This realization unified all the anomalies into a single sequence. The object arrives on a trajectory that allows prolonged alignment with the planet. It extracts a massive volume of water, a substance uniquely suited for energy storage and transfer. It uses that resource to generate a finely tuned burst of particles and gravitational manipulation. That burst interacts selectively with nuclear, biological, and magnetic systems, and the planet responds as a whole. At this point, the language in internal reports changed. Analysts stopped using terms like object and event and began using system and interface. 3I Atlas was no longer being treated as a visitor. It was being treated as a component interacting with a larger mechanism. That mechanism may not be new. Geophysicists revisited old, unresolved data sets. strange magnetic readings from the deep ocean, periodic thermal anomalies along mid-ocean ridges did not correspond to tectonic activity, unexplained low-frequency sounds recorded by hydrophones and dismissed as instrument noise. When these records were re-examined, patterns emerged. Many of them clustered around specific regions of the seafloor, regions that now, disturbingly, align with the projected path of the object's next pass. The implication is difficult to state plainly. Earth may contain structures or systems that respond to external signals, not alien cities or machines in any cinematic sense, but something older, subtler, embedded into the planet's physical processes. A dormant network that uses the planet itself as a medium. If such a system exists, it would need to be invisible to a pre-technological civilization. It would need to endure for geological timescales. It would need to activate only when a specific technological threshold was reached. And most importantly, it would need a trigger that could not be mistaken for natural noise. A precisely tuned, interstellar signal would qualify. Humanity may have unknowingly completed the final prerequisite. Our global satellite network, our constant electromagnetic emissions, our manipulation of the ionosphere may have made Earth finally loud enough to be detected and addressed. 3i Atlas could be less a pioneer and more a messenger, responding to a beacon we never meant to send. This reframes the ice extraction yet again. The water may not be for the object's use alone. It could be part of a larger activation sequence, a way to couple energy into Earth's systems efficiently. Water, after all, dominates the planet's surface and interior. It connects atmosphere, ocean, and crust. It is the perfect conductor for a planet-scale process. As these theories circulated among closed scientific groups, a final piece of data arrived that forced even the most cautious skeptics to reconsider. Deep-sea probes deployed years earlier, designed to monitor hydrothermal vents, began transmitting anomalous readings. Temperatures were rising in regions far removed from volcanic activity, not explosively, smoothly, gradually, as if heat were being introduced from an external source. The warming was not coming from below, from Earth's core. It was coming from above, propagating downward through the water column. And it was accelerating. The deep ocean is one of the most stable environments on Earth. Temperatures change slowly, predictably, over centuries, not hours. Yet the probes were clear. Across multiple basins, thousands of kilometers apart, sensors were recording the same anomaly. A uniform increase in temperature moving downward through the water column, layer by layer, as if the ocean itself were absorbing energy from the surface and carrying it into its depths. At first, researchers suspected instrument drift. Deep-sea probes operate under extreme pressure, and small errors are common, but redundancy killed that explanation. Independent systems, built by different agencies, calibrated years apart, were reporting identical trends. The signal-to-noise ratio was too clean to dismiss. Something was warming the oceans from the top down. That direction matters. Volcanic activity heats water from below. Tectonic shifts release energy upward. This was the reverse. Energy was entering the ocean from above, bypassing the atmosphere almost entirely, and distributing itself with remarkable uniformity. That is not how heat normally behaves in water. Turbulence, currents, and density gradients should have distorted the pattern. They did not. The warming followed a rhythm. Every increase aligned with subtle oscillations in Earth's magnetic field, the same low-frequency modulation triggered during the particle pulse. When the magnetic field peaked, temperatures rose slightly faster. When it relaxed, the increase slowed. The ocean was responding to the field, converting electromagnetic energy into thermal energy with surprising efficiency. This is where biology re-enters the picture. Marine biologists reviewing live data feeds noticed behavioral changes in deep-sea organisms long before temperature thresholds that normally trigger stress responses. Large schools altered migration paths. Bioluminescent species increased activity. Even microbial colonies near hydrothermal vents showed metabolic shifts inconsistent with their environment. These organisms were not reacting to heat alone, they were reacting to the signal. Life on Earth evolved under the constant influence of the planet's magnetic field. It guides migration, regulates cellular processes, and interacts subtly with biochemistry. If that field were being deliberately modulated, even gently, the biological consequences would be widespread and immediate, not catastrophic, but transformative. This reframes the entire sequence one more time. The goal does not appear to be destruction, extraction, or even contact in any conventional sense. There is no evidence of hostility, no demand, no message. Instead, there is preparation, calibration, alignment. Earth is being tuned. The Arctic ice was not chosen at random. Polar regions are where magnetic field lines converge, where interaction with the magnetosphere is most direct. Removing that mass may have reduced interference, allowing cleaner coupling between the external signal and the planet's internal systems. The harvested water then provided the means to amplify and sustain that signal. And now, the energy is being distributed where it matters most, into the oceans, which regulate climate, host the majority of Earth's biomass, and act as a global buffer between surface and interior. If you wanted to influence a planet gently but thoroughly, this is exactly how you would do it. What remains unclear is intent. Activation for what purpose? Communication? Awakening? Maintenance? The data does not tell us, but it does suggest design. Nothing about this process is wasteful. Every interaction is efficient, precise, and reversible. That implies foresight, testing, and restraint. Perhaps this has happened before. Geological records hint at rapid but non-destructive transitions in Earth's past. Sudden climate stabilizations, bursts of biodiversity, magnetic excursions that resolved without extinction. Events we attribute to chance or poorly understood feedback loops may have been interventions, moments when the planet was nudged rather than left to drift. If that is true, then 3I Atlas is not an invader, it is a technician. And technicians do not announce themselves. They arrive, do the work required, and leave systems running better than before. Whether better aligns with human priorities is another matter entirely. As projections update, one fact is now certain: the object is not finished. Its altered trajectory brings it back into alignment in less than 72 hours. The next interaction window will be longer, stronger, and based on current models, it will not focus on ice or reactors or orbiting astronauts. It will focus on us, which brings us back to Earth itself. Because during the same window in which nuclear decay rates shifted and human hearts aligned, magnetometers across the planet recorded a subtle but global disturbance. Earth's magnetic field did not weaken. It did not strengthen. It oscillated. A low-frequency modulation passed through the magnetosphere, too slow to be a solar storm, too uniform to be natural. For 12 seconds, the planet rang like a struck bell, and whatever struck it was no longer just passing by. By the time global leaders were briefed on that conclusion, the language had shifted again. The word threat was still avoided, but so was anomaly. The briefings now described a planetary scale interaction in progress. That phrasing mattered. It acknowledged that whatever was happening was not localized, not temporary, and not something that could be contained with borders, defenses, or diplomacy. Human responses followed familiar patterns anyway. Military commands raised alert levels, Satellites were repositioned, submarines were put on quiet watch. Emergency sessions were held at the United Nations, where representatives debated statements that carefully avoided panic while saying almost nothing of substance. None of it changed the data coming in. As 3I Atlas adjusted its orbit, its emissions became easier to characterize. The pulses were no longer sporadic. They formed repeating sequences, each one slightly different from the last, like iterative testing. Frequency sweeps ran through bands used by human communication systems, not to jam them, but to probe how the planet responded. Power levels remained low enough to avoid damage, yet high enough to be unmistakable.